The Arosa Line is one of many unique narrow-gauge railways in Switzerland, winding its way through difficult mountainous terrain between the towns of Chur and Arosa. Although the track is only 26 kilometres long, it takes an hour to complete a full-length run because of the severe speed limits, which are no higher than 35 kilometres per hour. We've had this particular railway in Train Sim World for around 3 years now, but the add-on was made by Rivet Games, a notorious third-party developer with a reputation for churning out very low-quality products. Ironically, they were actually the first third-party developer to make add-ons for TSW, and in the years since, you would be forgiven for thinking that they would have used that time to improve their DLC quality as much as possible. But instead, we got rubbish like West Cornwall Local and S-Bahn Central Schweiz, and the rest, as they say, is history. In any case, I had previously reviewed the Arosa Line add-on in August 2023, near the end of the TSW3 era, but I thought it was time to update the old review. Prior to going out of town again, I had planned to review Dovetail's Southampton to Bournemouth route in TS Classic, but realised I didn't have enough time left to finish that video, so I chose Arosa and something else in TS Classic as an alternative. The Arosa Line DLC was first released in March 2021, back when Train Sim World 2 was the latest version of the base game. Now we're on Train Sim World 5, make of that what you will, and the version of the Arosa Line that's compatible with TSW 5 costs $43.59 NZD at full price. Why the price has increased by $7.50 is anyone's guess. This was the first TSW route to take place in Switzerland and use narrow gauge track instead of standard gauge. To be specific, this line uses meter gauge track. Rivet have since released 2 more Swiss routes for the game, but one of them, namely S-Bahn Central Schweiz, turned out to be one of the worst routes in TSW history, at least in my opinion. As for rolling stock, the base route comes with the Rhätische Bahn GE 4/4 Mark II electric locomotive, 2 variants of the EW1 passenger coach, one of which has a first-class section, then the G-Packwagen luggage van and the SP-W timber wagon. Curiously, the original TS Classic version of this route, made by Thomson Interactive, includes the ABE 8/12 Allegra electric multiple unit, and the GE 4/4 Mark II, plus EW1 coaches, were released later in a separately sold pack of their own. Rivet has since brought the Allegra to TSW as well, but only as a part of their Bernina line add-on. I still refuse to buy that route for 3 main reasons. 1. The route's coverage doesn't go all the way to St. Moritz. 2. The Allegra doesn't even have a timetable mode layer on the Arosa line. And 3. The Bernina line DLC doesn't even include the Bernina Express coaches, just the standard EW1 stock again. Go figure that one out. While Rivet has made additional DLC for the Arosa line since its initial release, said content is only in the form of 2 gameplay packs. It's no secret that I'm generally not a fan of gameplay packs. That's mainly because they barely add anything new and often cost far too much money for what you get. Across both packs, you get 7 liveries for the GE 4/4 Mark II, 2 additional items of rolling stock, 2 new timetables, and some scenarios. That's it. And what you don't get is a locomotive that's actually new to TSW. The versions of these 2 gameplay packs that are compatible with TSW 5 cost 22 New Zealand dollars each, but they are not worth anywhere near that much money. A more reasonable price would have been around $5 or $6 each. The first of these packs is the RHB Anniversary Collection of December 2021, followed by the Arosa Aggregates pack of November 2023. Anniversary includes 5 liveries for the locomotive and a yellow observation coach. The latter sometimes appears in the consists of timetable mode services. The specific locomotive liveries are as follows: Number 619, Bernina Line, 100 years. Number 620, Beaver to Skol to Rasp, 100 years. 623, RHB, 125 years. 627, Core to Arosa, 100 years. And 630, Core to DeSantis, 100 years. It's somewhat ironic that 619's livery honours a line that she can't actually run on. Her class can't go any further south than Pontresina because the Bernina line uses a different voltage from the rest of the RHB network. As for Arosa Aggregates, it only includes the FAC ballast wagon and 2 new liveries for the locomotive. The liveries are Hakone Tozan Railway for number 622 and Neubau Albula Tunnel for number 629. Incidentally, when this pack was first released, 622's cabins were painted in the standard RHB red instead of the more orangey red seen on the real thing. As you can see, this mistake has since been corrected, but the fact that it ever made it out to customers at all is pretty disappointing. In any case, the modelling on the GE 4/4 Mark II and her accompanying rolling stock is done very well, and that's one of the few positive things I can say about Rivet products. The default timetable mode that comes with the base route includes 84 playable services for the GE 4/4 Mark II, and it has her running the standard hourly passenger service between Kur and Arosa. Besides the passenger run, you can also do run-round/shunting manoeuvres at each end of the line. I remember the original timetable being absolutely horrendous, in the sense that, for whatever reason, the schedule only allowed around 48 minutes to complete a full run on this line, which is impossible. Fortunately, the timetable has since been updated to the point where it's not ludicrously tight anymore. The new timetable included with the RHB Anniversary Collection doesn't differ too much from the original, aside from having extra express services and the observation coach on a few trains. Sometimes, the GE 4/4 Mark II will only be hauling 2 EW1s and an observation coach instead of the usual 4 EW1s. As for the Arosa Aggregates timetable, this adds occasional mixed trains and the shunts from Arosa Station down to the aggregate siding. All the extra gameplay pack liveries can substitute into each of the 3 timetables if you don't want to drive with the stock standard RHB red. The most common consist on this route is one locomotive pulling 3 EW1 coaches and the G-Park-Wagen luggage van, with occasional exceptions in all 3 versions of the timetable. For the longest time, you couldn't run any freight services to and from the Arosa Aggregates terminal, and it wasn't until the release of the Arosa Aggregates gameplay pack when you could finally do so. Besides the ballast and passenger runs, the only other service you can run on this route is the log train to and from St. Peter Molinus. It's a good thing that the SP-W flatbed wagon is included with the route itself, but as for the FAC ballast wagon, quite frankly, I think it's ridiculous that it wasn't included in the base route right out of the gate. One of the weakest aspects of this route is the scenery, especially where the distant mountains are concerned. Most of the time, the mountains only have a few trees awkwardly scattered about the place, and it sours the view as you're driving along, although the route looks a little better, more atmospheric, in winter time. In contrast to the distant mountains, the immediate trackside scenery is perfectly fine, for the most part, and I especially like the architecture of the buildings at all the intermediate stations, except Kurstadt, which is basically just a bus stop that trains can also call at. A strange feature on the Arosa line is the street running section in Kur, but Rivet's recreation of it in TSW is pretty underwhelming. Although there are static buses and moving cars visible in a few places, this section still looks very dry and lifeless because there are absolutely no NPCs walking up and down the footpaths, or sitting at these restaurant tables outside the railway station, for that matter. Sometimes, I've even seen cars continue to go through the intersection as the train is approaching, so they just phase through the coaches. Make of that what you will. And the less said about this rendition of the mainline station at Core, the better. Besides the borderline laughable distant scenery, another major flaw with the Rivet's Arosa Line is the lack of a properly functioning request stop system. In real life, 4 of the line's intermediate stops, namely Korstadt, Leuenkasteel, St. Peter Molinus, and Peist, are only made by request. Passengers wishing to alight at one of these stations have to press a button in the coach to alert the driver, while passengers wishing to board have to press a button somewhere at the station that illuminates a nearby signal, which would have 2 flashing white lights on a black background. When you're running a timetable mode service, you should only have Langvis and Litzeruti listed as intermediate stops in the service list. But because the request stop system seemingly wasn't properly implemented, the other stations will still appear in the service list as if they were regular stops. There are 2 more issues specifically affecting the GE 4/4 Mark II locomotive that I think are worthy of mention. First of all is the sounds, which are not all that good, as is usually the case with Rivet's rolling stock. Indeed, I'm pretty sure the motor audio is nicked from the 1972 tube stock. I'm no expert on physics, but even I think those on this locomotive are a bit out of whack, for want of a better expression. The locomotive seems to accelerate too quickly, and when you initially open the throttle to get her moving from a standing start, she awkwardly jolts into position instead of making a smooth start. I wouldn't have thought the real thing would act like this, assuming Rivet got the physics right, which I doubt they did. While Rivet did at least fix the timetable issue, the fact that they still haven't bothered to fix the other major problems still present on the Arosa line is very telling. This practice of theirs, where they churn out, pardon my French, crap DLC and either don't bother fixing it or take ages to only fix some of the problems, is one of the reasons why they're so notorious in the TSW community. They're essentially a worse version of Dovetail when it comes to quality control, or lack thereof. Personally, I think Rivet Games did the Arosa line very wrong when they brought it to Train Sim World. Essentially, it's a great concept ruined by lousy execution, but I give it a 5 out of 10. To an extent, I can still recommend the route purely because of its combination of meter-gauge track, street running, and steep grades that make for a challenging driving experience, although you should wait until it goes on sale before picking it up. The strange thing is that, despite the overall poor quality, I still like to drive on this route from time to time because of my interest in Swiss narrow gauge. But based on their track record, I don't want Rivet to make any more Swiss content for TSW. If they do, one can only hope that it will at least be decent. Wishful thinking, I know.